Welcome to the Resilient Reiner, the premier podcast focused on mental performance for equestrians and improved horse show performance. Whether you're a rookie reiner or a seasoned competitor, this show is for riders who want to take their skills to the next level and achieve their full potential in the show ring. I'm Nicole Burnett, and I'm a master mindset coach who's obsessed with helping you achieve all those horse dreams you always thought were impossible. Join me each week to develop a show-ready mindset and gain the competitive edge you need to compete with confidence. Welcome, everybody, back to Resilient Reiner. I am thrilled today to have a special, super secret guest. And
so special, so secret.
So secret. Joining me today for a conversation-style podcast is the lovely, the handsome Abraham Burnett, my husband and business co-founder.
Oh.
So for today's episode, we are going to talk conversation style. What do you do when things don't go according to plan? And how do you not just get stuck there? Because that happens all the time at horse shows. You bomb a run, but then you have to go do another one. So how do you not let that just ruin your day? Or just when things don't go to plan and it's hard. And this was really inspired today.
How do you bounce back fast?
How do you bounce back fast?
Because that's a key mental performance skill.
It really is. It is such a key mental performance. And I felt really called to this episode today because we'd recorded an entire episode. It was so good.
And it was an hour long, which is like my shortest conversation ever.
We had a really great conversation about all the lessons we can take from Tom Cruise and Hollywood stuntmen and how to use careful, thoughtful preparation and all the lessons we can apply to our horse lives. And there was a mess up with our technical equipment and it didn't get recorded. So
yeah. Heard our words, but not our voices. How's that happen?
So we, still got to record something right now. So we're doing this episode and I can feel it inside me that I was like a little cranky. I was like, what are we going to talk about? And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about anything. And I thought, I have the perfect topic for today. What do we do when we're in this situation? When things go sideways with your horse stuff and you just have that cranky feeling and you want to put your toys back in your,
toy box
and just
go cry.
Yeah. So you're like, I'm not playing with anybody else today.
Yeah.
So I thought this is the perfect time to just talk about that and talk about what are strategies we can use. And this is actually a demonstration of a strategy that works well because sometimes you want to go be alone. But sometimes it can be really helpful to not be alone, right? Or to be around somebody who has a healthy mental perspective, who will interject when you start ruminating and saying rude, mean things to yourself.
Yeah.
So that's step one, right? So is there somebody, because there are people who are not going to do that for you, but there are people who will. So if there's someone who is a little less emotionally invested, who can kind of catch you when you start with negative thought patterns, that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Abe's also demonstrating by pacing around right now. Physical movement is another great strategy because when I feel like I should be pacing now. I'm going to pace because when we have these feelings, we're having a really strong, physical experience in our body and not just in our minds. And so physical movement is really helpful.
Yeah.
It might sound a little silly, but going on a walk, doing some jumping jacks, like moving your physical body is a great way to move out any of those kind of frustrating feelings.
Yeah. I mean, it actually kind of reminds me of a quote I saw about how, for most, or many at least, like athletes in any space, like a lot of times when it's time for them to actually perform, they don't want to perform. They don't feel up for it.
Just don't feel like that.
Maybe, for myriad of reasons, right? Like maybe they have a headache or a migraine, or they got flipped off at the stoplight for some reason because they didn't quite get their rig through it, and somebody in their little tercel was just angry and waiting.
I don't know if they make Tercels anymore.
Well, they don't. So it's someone driving a shitty car.
I think this is also, I need to point out a third strategy, which is humor. If you can get yourself to laugh, this is my favorite thing about Abe is he makes me laugh. But when you're having those feelings, you're probably feeling pretty serious and pretty upset. So if you can have a genuine moment of laughter, that really helps release so much.
Yeah.
I like to keep youth playlists around just for this reason if I don't have Abe. Like when I need to laugh, what can make me laugh?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting too, because I think we both had that moment like where, I don't think that it is either healthy and we're not like proposing kind of like trying to push it under the rug, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
It's kind of like about just recognizing. It's almost like just kind of like accepting what is.
It's a part of accepting what is.
And it's kind of like when we had that, when we realized that it hadn't been recording and we recorded this whole hour and we were like, just that, sinking feeling. And then you just kind of like take a step back, maybe you go to the bathroom, you get a drink of water or a cup of tea, and then you just kind of collect yourself a little bit. And it's just kind of like, it is kind of like a show because you got to deliver, right?
Exactly. That's what really made the parallels was just that you have to deliver. It's going to be your turn. You have to do your other run. You have to do whatever. And if you have your feelings, if things aren't going well, like how do you cope with that?
Yeah. Yeah. And so like strategies, you already mentioned humor.
Movement.
And you mentioned movement. You mentioned, what else was it? Humor, movement.
Phone a friend.
Oh,
just someone else who can help interrupt negative rumination and unhealthy thought patterns.
Yeah, because when you phone a friend, to be clear, there are certain people who will encourage the rumination.
Oh yeah, so that's what I'm saying. You got to choose carefully.
Choose carefully, yeah. And so interrupt those thought patterns. What else?
I think it can be helpful to have. It depends how much time you have between your runs. And so some of this can be for after a horse show and like a debrief phase. But I think that it's helpful to have a list of questions, right? Because a lot of times when you're in that more negative space, you have questions that are based in judgment. And so this can be helpful to curate, a list ahead of time, but having a list of questions that are based in curiosity is really powerful. For example, if you were thinking of like, if you're looking for judgment and blame, you might think this to blame. Whose fault is this? Why can't I perform? Why can't the horse perform? Like, whose fault is this? Instead of, if you're coming at it from more curiosity, you might think, what am I personally responsible for? As opposed to my horse, my trainer, whoever, right? What am I personally responsible for? And you might even circle back around to what are my goals? And so is this success or failure? How does that relate to what I'm really trying to achieve?
So I hear you saying basically that advocating for like a debrief.
Oh, absolutely.
After the show, but even more than a debrief, like a formal,
a specific kind of debrief, because you're not looking to,
more like an analytical debrief.
Yeah.
Like, because, what I hear you saying is because it's kind of like that could have value because it kind of takes the emotion out of it.
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm saying is taking the emotion out of it. And instead of coming at it from a place of judgment and blame, and I can do a whole list of questions that are rooted in that. And I think I will in a moment, because those are questions that's usually where we're at.
Maybe we should actually provide our community with a debrief form, that people can use after their show.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We like to send out freebies. So we will create a freebie here of how to debrief at a show, or how might you be phrasing things in a negative fashion versus a healthier fashion, because it's about how do you shift out of that negative judgment into curiosity and learning.
Yeah. So we'll just send it out.
So if you're on our email list,
and if you're not, joining it is super easy. You just go to newsletter.resilientreiner.com.
Yeah, newsletter.resilientreiner.com, and we like to send freebies to our community. Friday. And that debrief really takes the emotion out of things in a way that emotion is not bad, but if you're blinded by your emotions, you're not going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm trying to say. So like, if you're just trying to think, how can I prove I'm right? How can I prove that this is all my trainer's fault? Like,
or my horse's fault.
It's all Snicker's fault. Okay. They're such a jerk. Like, you're not going to be improved. Instead of, you might ask yourself things like, okay, what are the facts? What are my assumptions? Right? That's a really powerful question. What am I assuming about what went down?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we might think something's a fact when it's actually just an assumption. Or
our perspective.
It's your perspective, but it's not necessarily some objective truth.
Yeah.
So that's
probably most of life. And
no, but that's why it's so powerful to question it, right?
Yeah. Question your assumptions.
Yeah. So if you're thinking, why aren't we winning? You know, that's not a very empowering question, just kind of by itself, instead of thinking more about
kind of really broad. And
it's really broad, and it places you and your, exactly. It's just not useful. It's too broad. Like, you know, what a better question might be, what do I want? What do you want out of that run, right? Mm-hmm. Did you decide a version of success? Like, how did you define success for you before you went in the arena, right? Like, I want a clean lead change at center. Okay, did you get it? Like, so what do you want out of your run? Because we all want perfect runs, but is your goal really, like in reining, for example, is your goal to get a 75 every run?
Yes.
I mean, absolutely.
I mean, if I was a reiner, I would, yes, that was my goal.
But there's probably some interim steps and interim goals along the way. So what do you really want out of that run? Yeah. That's a more useful question. What steps, again, from a curiosity and kind of learning perspective, what steps can I take to get there?
What almost, so pragmatic too, because I mean, you always, call me on this, where it's like, don't miss the forest for the trees, in terms of like, even if things haven't gone like perfectly, or like, categorically we're not happy with the sum of the pieces.
Yeah.
That still doesn't mean that every piece was equally poor. I mean, we talk about this with our kids all the time, because they'll be like, I had the worst day.
Even in the worst day, that's probably, I'm not saying it's not possible, but usually there's a recency phenomenon, and there's probably something that was good.
Yeah. So like recency phenomena just means that you tend to focus most on what most recently happened. Like, the closer it is in time to the present moment, the more
weight you place upon that event. Yeah.
So there's primacy and recency. So the first moment gets a lot of weight, and the last moment gets a lot of weight.
So use that. Let's, hot tip here. When you're in the show pen, primacy and recency, how you enter that show pen will absolutely influence what the judge is expecting to see from you and how you end. So
yeah, that's a good point.
So use that.
Yeah.
Psychological life hack.
So that's that's a bonus, because it's not even something that's directly like,
not even what we're talking about. But no, but that's
gravy.
I couldn't leave that and not mention it.
No, we're just giving out gravy here. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But, it's the whole idea that even when you're not happy with the whole,
was there anything that went well? You
give yourself this emotionless, kind of pragmatic, just kind of dried out.
Let's just be neutral and evaluate.
Neutral, just non-judgmental. It's almost like almost a meditative state.
Yeah.
Right? Like, where you're just without judgment as much as you can, just looking at what happened.
Yep.
But biasing toward, like, what did you like? Because you only change when you feel good, right?
Yes, absolutely. We're talking about just getting in a very neutral emotional state to evaluate what happened and make sure that you don't gloss over anything positive that you may have achieved, even though some pieces may have just been terrible.
Well, the irony is just that we tend to, as humans, focus on the negative.
Because you might have totally, like, trotted out of your rollback, and then you will completely disregard the fact that your lead changes that you've been working on, that they were clean and beautiful and right on center.
Yeah. And so the key is just that if you're focusing on what you did well and sucking the negative emotion out of things, then you will get more of that in subsequent shows, runs. Yeah, so on and so forth.
All right. So I think that's a really valuable tip. And if you finished a run and you have time before another run the next day, there might even be value in doing it before your next run and definitely after a show. What about, however, let's say you don't always have time for that. So we talked about 3 good tips for when you have shorter time. What else can people do? So that's because definitely that's one if you have a little bit more time. So are there any other strategies that people...
Do you have back-to-back runs?
Well, it depends. Like, so if you have... It depends what kind of horse show you're doing. Because if you're doing a reining show, unless you have different horses, probably not. Okay. You probably have time in between. You know,
I'm just curious how much time.
Okay. I don't know. I'm going to guess an hour or 2.
Because that probably shifts or shapes something.
If you're at like an AQHA show or a range versatility show, you might have classes back to back because you might go from, ranch pleasure to ranch riding like immediately. Okay. So it might be a lot quicker.
Like right away? Seriously?
Well, I mean, what if you were first?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Right? What if you bombed the rail class and then you're first out for the pattern? Okay,
so people are going to need strategies that they can do in an hour or 2, as well as strategies that they can do in like 30 seconds.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw out one of my favorites because we can't not talk about box breathing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, just not surprised.
I mean, that's how she lives. It's like all box breathing. In bed at night. So, there's no snoring. It's box breathing.
It's amazing because the cool thing about box breathing is that you can literally do 4 rounds in 1 minute. You're always going to have 1 minute,
Yeah.
I would just be like, wait, I need 1 minute. Okay.
Yeah,
timer,
give me
go.
A minute. Okay.
Be a diva.
Give me a minute here.
1 minute. Time me.
A minute.
But box breathing is great because that's something that if you have a really quick turnaround or if you're just like, crazy.
Yeah, that's what the SEALs use, right?
Yeah. And so it is used by Navy SEALs.
Because apparently even Navy SEALs get nervous.
Can you imagine Navy SEALs, job's a little stressful. So the idea of box breathing is that imagine a box. Very simple. And so as you imagine a box, you breathe in for a count of 4. That's the first side of the box. The second side of the box, you pause and hold that breath for 4. Then the third side of the box, you exhale for a count of 4. And then the final 4th side of the box, you pause for a count of 4 before repeating. So if you do 4 rounds of that, that's a minute. It's really transformational.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, it just reminded me of sometimes when I do any kind of breathing, I'll couple that with visualization, kind of like imagining
I always imagine a box, but
wow, that is
so I want to know what you imagine.
I
literally
imagine taking in life force, almost like a golden substance in the air that's shining and shimmering, and it's just I don't know why this isn't scary, because you could imagine that you could make a horror movie about some golden death.
It's obviously loving light.
Yeah, it's loving light, exactly. So you get the idea.
I understand. I do.
Loving light.
Yeah.
So I breathe it in, and then I allow it to kind of go through all my body, and touch all the taint, and so for the taint can be whatever.
Do you know what taint?
No, not that. Not that taint. When I say taint, I mean filth or whatever. It's stuff that you don't want, right? The infection of negative energy, or she's talking about that is not safe for work, folks.
You cannot explain that. We're gonna have to.
No, we're gonna leave it in. No, you can leave it in. That's part of the joy of interacting with us. It's we are inappropriate. Okay, so
I just can't.
I was saying taint, the things that you don't, what's a synonym for taint? That isn't where Nicole's dirty mind went.
Life with me is fun.
Yes.
I was gonna think of more of dark energy.
Yeah, dark energy. There we go. We have loving light. I like that. That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
So you breathe that in. I let it kind of like go everywhere in my body. I'm not going to say it. And then to breathe, like I like to imagine it capturing all the dark energy and then just kind of dragging it out. And then when I breathe out,
it's gone.
it's gone. It evaporates. I'm free. And so I think that that coupling of box breathing with kind of bringing in that loving light or whatever kind of imagery works for you.
Yeah.
Letting it kind of sink into your body and kind of spread out, gather anything that's not working for you, and then expelling it when you breathe out. It's going to be really like helpful because it's coupling two very powerful techniques.
Yeah.
And you can even add words in there, right?
Yeah.
Because I know like when I broke my ankle catastrophically all the way around. And so it was like at least three darkest months of my life.
Absolutely.
It was an incredible hell. And so I kind of relied on, like I had panic attacks like constantly for weeks, every day. And I relied on kind of box breathing plus visualization plus words. And so for me, like the words really help because I could breathe it. I could think I'm breathing in like health and vitality and relaxation and peace. I exhale, and this was kind of just thinking the words in my head, but exhaling anxiety and nervousness and tension. Yeah. So, I mean, like, I think that's a really good, but it doesn't take long to do those things. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why it's so powerful and just one of my favorite techniques, because when you're feeling that sense of frustration and overwhelm and you're kind of thinking, why bother?
Yeah.
Like you need something that is the tiniest micro habit to help get you out of it.
Well, it's actually so true because it reminds me about what they say about depression. How the worst thing about depression is that it tricks you into thinking that nothing you can do will matter.
Yeah.
Even though that is the antithesis of, I mean, when you are depressed, that's exactly what you need. You need to do anything.
Anything. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like it reminds me that that's probably exactly what you experience when you have a poor run or a run you're not happy with.
Well, yeah, you're thinking over and over, why bother? Why am I here? Why should I bother doing another run? And so,
or why even bother with the breathing? That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah,
because it can be toxic like that.
It's super toxic
because you'll be like, oh well, how could that possibly help? Because I really screwed that up. Like I'm a loser. Like losers don't win. Losers go home.
That's right.
Okay, cool.
So instead of giving into that thinking,
exactly.
You can counter it with, you would think like, what's possible?
Yeah. Or just give it like, or maybe it's even like useful to be like, well, don't even sign yourself up for the whole minute.
Yeah, do one box.
Just be like, I'm going to do one box. Because your brain is probably be like, fine, it's not going to help.
Do one box.
Okay, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
But that will get you started.
And I think that's so key because it's about when you're thinking those sorts of negative thoughts, you need the tiniest nugget, the tiniest grain of sand action to help switch out of that state. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got
so that's 5.
Wow. That's so many good tips. And so so that's like good if they don't have very much time. If they have an hour or two, I could see that actually could be good in some ways, but actually maybe even bad in others because it might actually
if you have an hour or two, should you go and saddle your horse?
But it might give you more rumination time,
exactly,
right?
Maybe you should start ruminating.
How do you kind of discharge all this stuff? And then how do you kind of I guess my question would be I imagine it would be helpful to kind of firewall the experience of runs, kind of compartmentalize them, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, because it's a healthy mental perspective because it's not about negative compartmentalization or shoving your feelings down in a box to deal with, never when you die.
Yeah.
It's about how do you healthily approach the fact that each run, while they're interrelated, is its own unique experience.
Yeah.
And that's the healthiest way to give each run its own best opportunity.
Yeah, because it strikes me that what we're really advocating for is at the show, you're compartmentalizing your runs, so you have a way of kind of performing, planning your performance, doing your performance, debriefing from your performance.
Yeah.
Kind of releasing, right?
Oh yeah.
But then also then you do another run or another class or whatever. But like, it's not, you might kind of do a whole show debrief afterward,
Yes.
but it's just a way of not allowing kind of run to run to derail you, maybe?
Oh, exactly. It's how do you handle when, when you have a poor run and then you have, in the morning and you have another one in the afternoon, how do you let that afternoon run be better?
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to do if I have a little more time, but let's say I have a morning run and an afternoon run. So I like to think about a mini debrief where I say, okay, what did I learn from that morning run? I'll say, is there anything that I want to do a little differently, a little, the same, the different? Do I want gosh, I wish I'd had just 10 more minutes of walking around for my warm up. Okay, that's a physical action I can take. I can be ready 10 minutes earlier. Okay, that'll make a material difference. Or I noticed that in this one corner, we got a little wiggles. I mean, like in the show pen, let's say I'm doing a circle to the left. I might have noticed that there was a moment where the horse and I were not connection. Like, okay, I'm going to prepare.
You got wiggles or the horse has wiggles?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Somebody's got the wiggles.
Okay. A lot of wiggles.
A lot of wiggles. So, I might prepare to okay, I'm going to check in on that circle right there.
Oh, okay.
Maybe there was a distracting clown.
So you're going to do that in the show pen?
Yes. Like you're thinking ahead to, there was something there. I'm going to address it.
I see. And this is your mini debrief.
Yeah.
What you're talking about. Okay. You're kind of thinking, this is more like you visualizing.
No, I'm thinking ahead to what am I going to do different, right? So I'm going to add 10 minutes of walking to my warm up. At, my left circle at that end gate, I'm going to make sure I check in with my horse, and maybe that's it.
Okay.
But instead of just not addressing it at all, I'll just think about, are there specific actions I can take?
Okay.
Because sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. Sometimes you're like, we practiced at home. I did my best. I kind of fumbled, whatever, but I don't think I really need to change anything. It was just the run was what it was. I need to go do it again. Does that make sense? Where sometimes you evaluate it and you're like, it was what it was. And okay. And other times you're like, no, I was really freaked out because I was rushed and I need that extra 10 minutes of walking. Right. Yep. But that's great to evaluate, right? Because then if it's something as simple as not every run is perfect, but there's not really anything to address, that's great because it means that your training plan is working. Not every run is going to be perfect, and you can stop yourself before you start ruminating on beating yourself up. You can just say, we're working the plan. The plan is great. We don't have to change everything because one run was imperfect.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing to recognize because sometimes people get in trouble because there's a few bobbles in their run, and then they think they need to change their whole training plan in their riding instead of sometimes there's just a few bobbles.
Well, so it's just interesting, because the premise of this episode is what to do when things don't go well.
Because some of what I'm saying, with those questions, is you're asking yourself, did I mess up because I made a mistake?
Yeah.
Did I mess up because of something that I did and that I should do something different?
Yeah.
Or did it just go imperfectly, but there's nothing that I would do differently?
Yeah.
It reminds me of questions we ask ourselves when we talk about imposter syndrome.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's just asking those important questions so you can just shut down negative thinking.
Yeah. Well, it just seems
and put yourself in an empowered spot.
Well, yeah. And I guess what you made me think about was just that how people kind of show up to shows and it's they're still practicing at the show.
Yeah.
And it kind of reminds me of I used to hate it as a kid, but my dad used to say when the time to perform has come, the time to prepare is past.
Yeah.
And I found that to be true in classical music, where the time to be practicing is not the recital. Wherever you're at that point,
you got what you got.
You got what you got, and that's what you roll with. And so kind of treat, and so as a non-horsey husband on the periphery of these things, it always feels I just am always amazed when I see people that kind of seem to show up at the show and they're still
trying to squeeze in some extra practice.
They're still cramming because it reminds me of us.
No,
in college,
it is. Actually. It's like trying to cram before the test.
Yeah, and we know, separately in that domain, we know studies show that cramming doesn't work.
That's why nobody
in
wants to read those
academics.
studies. Okay. Stop
'Cause they're
ruining people's
buzzkill.
worldview with your facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it just strikes me that that's partly like maybe like why people like kind of they're of two minds when they go to a show
Yeah.
where they go there and they're like practicing instead of approaching it like it's a test, right? Like, oh, this is a test or a quiz that tells me where I'm at, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have
Or
to
you're
be
accepting that, maybe your
emotion.
horse is going to get to a plus half spin,
Yeah.
but right now your spin's a 0. So
Yeah.
score a 0 and keep riding your run instead of,
Well, yeah. So it's likening it to
negativity.
things that I'm familiar with in college when we would study for, say math, right? Like there would be things, there would be topics that I knew we weren't as strong in, or I wasn't as strong in.
Yeah.
And I'd have to go into the test or, the parallel being the show, knowing that I wasn't quite there yet.
Yep. That maneuver is not quite there.
Yeah. And so it still is an opportunity to kind of like where you get a quiz or you get a test and you see your results and it's kind of like, well,
Okay.
yep, I'm weak where I thought I was weak. Oh, I'm actually weaker in this area than I thought I was. And that's the benefit of that
Yeah.
kind of emotionless kind of debrief.
Yep.
But it also seems to me like too, like, what are your thoughts about like how people spend their time between, in terms of like minimizing the chance that things go poorly, or in terms of like how they can kind of, I don't know how to put this because I don't want to kind of like get out of scope for our topic here, but like it seems that people at shows kind of like it's kind of a vacation. It's kind of like the KOA campground, right? Like maybe I'll go to the pool, maybe I'll get something to eat, maybe I'll get something to drink. I don't know, just however I feel like I'm hanging out, and it just feels like part of, I don't know, like when you think about the difference between a lot of horse shows, maybe especially at the regional level. I'm not familiar with the bigger ones, so I haven't been to any of those. But I'm just wondering if it would minimize the chance of kind of like, or would help bounce back faster if you had like a routine between I don't know. I guess I'm just curious your thoughts for like how flexible you can be and how regimented you need to be in terms of like both protecting your success and and like bouncing back faster.
So what does that have to do with going to the pool? I'm not understanding the question.
Okay, so one thing is probably not a pool on site. And so it's more of a metaphor for my perception of horse shows is that they're very haphazard for a lot of the contestants in terms of like, I don't know to what degree that is the case at like the top levels of competition, like level 4 or the pros like Matt Mills and Pawnee, like to what degree they are regimented between their like leading up to their shows.
So you're
or
talking about like
between runs,
Okay. Well, I can just tell you kind of some of what I do because some people hang around the showgrounds a lot more. I love to take a break because I find that to be good for me mentally. So if I'm done in the morning and I don't go again till the afternoon, I personally like to leave the showgrounds.
Yeah.
Maybe I do go to the pool. Maybe I go get coffee. Maybe I just go like sit in the hotel room. But I like that mental break.
Yeah.
That's helpful for me as a decompression. Some people like to hang around the showgrounds, but I think just whatever works for you, because I found it way more stressful for me when I was just on the grounds all the time. So there's that. The other thing is that I think it's really helpful to, coming back to curiosity, be curious about your pre-run routine and kind of dialing it in, because I think that a lot of people can be really haphazard about that instead of adopting the freedom to experiment and the freedom to adjust and change.
Yeah.
And so they're, so figuring out, okay, how long is it going to take you to get ready?
Yeah.
And I'll use this example of at home. I found it really helpful when it came to housework to literally time myself how long it took to do certain tasks, because I would make it up in my mind that it was going to take forever to clean up after dinner. It was going to take forever to sweep the floor. And
it does. I mean,
so I wouldn't do it. And then nobody would do it. And then we'd have a dirty floor. And so one day, busted out the timer.
She did. She's not fooling.
I was like, we're going to sweep the floor and time it. And we were in a smaller house then, but it took 2 minutes.
Yep.
And I felt a little sheepish, honestly, because I was like, okay. But that was massive for me to have the actual knowledge of I can sweep this floor. It will take 2 minutes. So I'm pretty sure it takes longer now. We need to retime it. Calling ourselves out.
Yeah.
But that changed a lot for me, knowing how long it took.
Yeah.
And so I think for horse shows, there can be a similar sort of thing. How long does it take you to saddle your horse? How long does it take to put on your wraps?
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take to, to just get ready?
Yeah, just trying to set yourself up for success.
Exactly, because then and then you can try it. And then you can experiment with different warm-ups and talk to your trainer or not, but a lot of them seem pretty chill about what, people do. But, do you because there are a lot of people who are like, 10 minutes, I hop on, I go, boom, we're done. Like, that's it. And then there are other people who are like, well, I like to walk around for 10 minutes and just kind of settle my horse / settle their own nerves. And then they do, another 10 minutes of trotting or whatever. But figuring out, do you need a longer warm up, a shorter warm up? It varies by horse. It varies by person. And it's really empowering to give yourself the freedom to try different things. Try warming up way early. Try warming up with almost nothing. How does it feel? And then also the other thing that can happen is, does it take you more or less time to get ready at a horse show versus when you're at home? Yep. Because sometimes when you're at home, we might dilly-dally and be braiding their manes and telling them how beautiful they are and just talking to somebody in the aisle. And so maybe it takes longer. And then when you're at the show, you're really focused and you've got to get there. And so it's quick. Or it might be the opposite. Maybe in your day-to-day life, you don't have a lot of time. You're in and out. It's bing, bang, boom. And then when you go to the horse show, you're like, oh gosh, I want to make sure all the shavings are out of your tail and I got to give you extra shine spray, and it takes you longer. Yeah. But all of these things can really, it just helps to figure out what are your specifics. So then you can figure out, okay, if, each run, if I give 4 minutes a run, I'm going to go at approximately this time. So then I can get ready at this time and just play with it.
Yeah, I can see that being really helpful. Yeah. I could see and we've talked about this before, I'm just wondering, I don't know if we've come up with any good answers, but the warm-up pens can be kind of a zoo.
They're always a zoo.
And so and that seems to be kind of a good way to kind of harsh your vibe, as it were.
I think we need to do a whole episode where we talk about the warm-up pen.
Well, yeah, just because I feel that's such an,
but then I think we need to have an entire episode.
I don't know how long people are, because I don't do it, but since I'm a non-horsey husband here, but whatever amount of time that is from the warm-up pen to actually, your go, that to me seems probably a really critical. How long would you say that is for most people?
It depends. Probably 10 to 20 minutes.
Okay. But it could be the 10 or 20 minutes that makes or breaks your entire run.
Oh, yeah.
Just because we talked about this just this week, where how a lot of people might think that they're doing mental performance techniques because they do 2 deep breaths or they in a desperate attempt to kind of make up for all the stuff they haven't done before they go. Yeah. They try to just jam the imagining their run into that really short time frame, right? Or they're maybe warming up in the warm-up pen trying to imagine their run. But the last time you want to be actually using these techniques, or trying to cram with them, is
when you're trying
the last moment. Because, then you're going to be well, I breathed for 2 seconds and it didn't work for me. Well, yeah, no shit. Because, it's it'd be trying to be lifting, you go to a powerlifting competition and you've never lifted weights and you go to pick up a 100-pound barbell in each hand, and you're probably not going to do super well. Anyway, but I'm just curious. So yeah, I agree. We have to do a whole episode talking about that 10 to 20 minutes.
So I think if we were going to bring it back to what happens when you blow a run and you're just really feeling all of the why bother energy. What
really sad about yourself and your horse and your life and your choices.
That's right.
Yeah.
Down on all of it.
Super down.
So if we talk about the warm-up pen as a specific juncture coming out of that feeling.
Yeah.
Was there something for people to be aware of in the warm-up pen? And probably the biggest thing I would say would be to do all these other strategies so that when you come back to the warm-up pen, because it can be a very stressful place, you have effectively shifted your energy and shifted your attitude. That would be what I would say.
Yeah. Well, I kind of wonder, like, to what degree, like I haven't had this experience, but like for you in that position, when a run hasn't gone the way you wanted it to, and you're riding back to the warm-up pen, and maybe your trainer's like down there too, like, it seems like people don't take the time to kind of to like center before they leave. Maybe they feel like they need to get out of the pen so the next person can go
out of the show arena.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. You got to get the heck out of Dodge.
So you got to get the heck out of Dodge. Okay. But I'm just wondering, I think it can make a big difference for people in terms of like, I'm imagining if I ever did that and I feel bad about how things have gone, I'm going to see it. I'm going to project onto like recrimination or whatever the word is, like kind of judgment. I'm going to put that in the faces of everybody I see. And they're like, I'm going to see my trainer looking at me, and maybe he's not having any judgment of his own, but maybe I'm imagining it because of how I feel, right? Like, or I'm imagining like the subtle things like, oh, he really thinks I just really flubbed it. Oh man, he's probably embarrassed I'm his client. I mean, I'm just imagining that would be my feelings. Or if I go out in the warm-up pen, I'm going to interpret any random glance from anybody as being like
pity
or
scorn
or like, ha ha ha, yes, my time has come. Can walk on your grave. Win. Victory is mine. Anyway, so I'm just kind of curious, like, there might be some kind of like, to your point, there might be some things that people could do. Because I don't think it's a good idea to probably like stare at the ground. Like, I actually remember reading about this, like in terms of like, a lot of people who are depressed, like they stare at the ground when they walk. They walk with their eyes downcast. And they actually found that if you can get people to raise their eyes and just look at the horizon and like eyes up, like that actually materially impacts like their emotional state.
So I hear you advocating for biohacking, and when you flub it, walk out with your head held high and, staring straight ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't stare at the dirt.
Yeah, definitely don't stare at the dirt. Don't be staring at your horse's mane. Yeah. Don't be looking down. Don't be like slouching,
Yeah.
Probably like, what's the phrase? Like accept it with dignity.
Dignity would be the,
yeah.
I think we're probably torn on is the cowboy way to accept it with dignity, or is it to suffer your shame?
Well, I think you've kind of called out like that there's a dichotomy between like,
there is a dichotomy
where like there's like there's kind of a lack of clarity in the community about like which kind of cowboy is the ideal, right?
Well, it kind of varies by the day and
and by the person, right?
Absolutely.
Because there's like you've pointed out that actually like in a lot of ways there is a very strong traditional cowboy that is, you could argue, like very mentally performance-y, coachy, right? Like,
oh, it's just very mentally attuned and resilient.
Yeah, like where they're not like the hard drinking, like kind of like rough and rowdy, kind of like fall on their face, guns blazing type approach to a success, but like I don't know, like, but just that they're kind of more of a quiet cowboy, right? Like where they are maybe somewhat, you might even describe it as stoic, right? Where they're kind of like, they have a filter, they have a command center, like as the Stoics called it, like that, where they saw it as their kind of sacred duty to observe their emotions in a dispassionate, kind of non-judgmental way and decide
that's only fair to the horse,
which ones were allowed to kind of like impact them, right? And so I don't know, like I think Stoicism is probably something we'll have to do another episode about, because I think there's some problems with it, because that can be kind of equivalent to just shoving your emotions under the carpet.
Well, I think we'll have to unpack that in another.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So if we rewind to like,
let's rewind to see,
because we had like five.
We had 5 really solid things.
Like that was like 40 minutes ago.
And then we had like a nice bird trail.
Oh yeah,
that was
like
super
such
fun.
A great bird trail.
So fun.
Oh yeah. Didn't see a lot of birds though.
Didn't you?
No.
I don't know. Were the birds tweeting? Or All right. So do we want to like wrap with those 5, or are there any other like?
Well, I feel like we added to the 5, and
Those were the 5 solid ones I remember.
well, let's at least name the 5.
Okay. So we had have an accountability buddy or somebody, a friend that you can phone or be with at the show who can help call you out if you fall into interrupt negative thought patterns.
Yep.
Physical exercise to
Yep.
move out the feelings, literally move them out of your body. Laughter
Yep.
was the third one.
So movement, laughter, interruption buddy.
Box breathing, that was 4. And then 5 was essentially doing a debrief.
A debrief, yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked some about visualization and affirmations, essentially, I guess you could say, combined with breathing.
Yeah.
And then I think we kind of just also talked about like kind of firewalling each run, right? If you have the chance, right? Like,
And part of that is just having a forward focus.
yeah. So it's actually, it's interesting you put it that way, because that's very much like a horse kind of, like there's kind of fundamental horse principle.
You always need
like
impulsion in your horse. You always more forward.
Right.
If you have any problems in your training, it's always more forward, more forward.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck, just more forward.
Yeah. And so like, I think that that's an interesting call out, because it suggests that is a good thing to
Tell
adopt
yourself
as a
more
mentality.
forward.
Just be forward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That run is done.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you'll and also just give yourself permission to kind of like wait to deal with it till later, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
like that, hey self, like you're having some big feelings, totally get that. We're gonna do another run here. We have some more work to do.
Yeah.
But we will revisit that, tomorrow or in an hour or whatever, right?
Yeah. And just having another big thread through everything we've talked about has been maintaining an attitude of curiosity and openness.
Yeah.
And so instead of just coming at from judgment, even when you are assuming responsibility, it's assuming responsibility for what can I own and what happened in my run, and not who's to blame, right? And so having curiosity and openness as you explore what happened, what worked, when you prepare your pre-run routines, being willing to experiment and, just being open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's really good. I think we've given.
I think this has been a good
really
episode.
Yeah. It's back strong.
We did. I am absolutely feeling the emotional shift after how upset I was.
Well, good job. High five.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. And don't forget, newsletter.resilientreiner.com. You sign up for the newsletter, we're going to send out that fun freebie about doing a debrief and how to look at things in healthier ways.
Yeah. So look for that in your inbox.
Be awesome. And don't forget, if you're listening to the end, scroll down, give this podcast episode a 5-star review, and write a comment of what you liked about it. And
this was fun.
This was fun. So thank you for joining us. So grateful to have you here, and we'll talk to you next week.
For the next 10 days only, we here at the Resilient Reiner newsletter and podcast, hosted by Nicole Burnett, are celebrating that our newsletter has grown by a huge 373% in the past 30 days. Y'all are getting value and spreading the word. Thank you. So to celebrate, we've created the Show Stop and Giveaway, where we're giving away over $860 in top-notch gear. Picture yourself in a sweet show-stopping fitted shirt and custom saddle pad, or learning the ropes from reigning superstar Matt Mills, or slipping a custom Masui Sui halter on your horse. Want in? Just head over to NicoleBurnettCoaching.com/giveaway to enter. It's that easy. Increasing your odds of winning is as easy as sharing the link after you sign up with your horsey friends and family. This giveaway is our way of saying thanks for making this community so special. Join the fun, spread the word, and good luck.